My children, I speak to you from the silence that followed the storm. It is 3 days since I stood before the assembled princes of the church and spoke words that have shattered centuries of careful silence. 3 days since I watched cardinals flee my presence like merchants from the temple. 3 days since the world learned that even the successor of Peter can tremble with righteous anger. They say I have divided the church. No, I have revealed a division that already existed, festering beneath our golden vestments like a wound we refused to heal. For too long we have chosen the comfort of blindness over the pain of sight. Today I choose to see, even if it costs me everything. The bells of St. Peter's still ring at their appointed hours, but their sound has changed. Or perhaps it is I who have changed, finally hearing what they have always proclaimed, that truth, like bronze, resonates only when it is struck.
I will not apologize for what I said in the Clementine Hall. The church I love is sick. These words did not spring from anger, but from love, the kind of love that refuses to watch beloved die quietly. Yes, our pews empty while we blame the world's seductions. Yes, our young flee while we blame their faithlessness. But I have looked into the mirror of conscience, and I have seen the truth we dare not speak. They do not flee from God. They flee from us. We have made the gospel a bureaucracy. We have turned the Mass into theater. We have replaced the fire of Pentecost with the cold efficiency of committees. When a mother cannot find comfort in our churches because her divorced daughter feels unwelcome, when a father cannot bring his questions because our answers sound like legal briefs, when the poor hear our sermons on poverty from golden pulpits, tell me, who has failed whom? I stood before those assembled shepherds and watched their faces as I spoke these truths. Some looked away, others checked their phones. A few, blessed be their names, wept. It was the weeping that told me the Holy Spirit had not abandoned us entirely.
Our church is empty because of our cowardice, I said, and Cardinal Toretti gasped as if I had struck him. But what else shall we call it when we know the truth and speak in riddles? What else when we see injustice and offer only prayers that cost us nothing? What else when we preach love while practicing exclusion? I think of a bishop in Guatemala who feeds the hungry while his superiors count coins. I think of a certain sister in Dublin who shelters the homeless while we shelter our reputations. I think of Father Chen in Hong Kong, who speaks truth to power while we speak pleasantries to donors. These are not rebels, these are the faithful ones, and we have let them stand alone because their courage made our comfort visible. The world watches us debate the width of altar cloths while children starve in our shadows. They see us arguing about liturgical Latin while the earth burns under our prayers. They witness our obsession with clerical privilege while the gospel cries out for servants, not sovereigns. Is it any wonder they turn away? When I announced the mandatory financial audits, a cardinal's face went white as his biretta. Every diocese, every religious order, Every Vatican office, I said, will open its books to the light of scrutiny. The silence that followed was not reverence, it was terror. Terror of transparency, of accountability, of having to explain why the widow's mite pays for episcopal limousines. But transparency is not punishment, it is purification. If we truly serve the poor, let us prove it with our ledgers. If we truly live simply, let us demonstrate it with our expenditures. If we truly follow him who had nowhere to lay his head, let us show where we lay ours and at what cost. The automatic removal of bishops who cover abuse, this drew not gasps, but growls. Due process, they muttered, canonical procedures, as if there were canonical procedures for protecting children that we had not already abandoned, as if there were due process for victims that we had not already denied. I will say it plainly, any shepherd who delivers the lamb to the wolf forfeits his crook. Any father who betrays his children forfeits his title. Any successor of the apostles who chooses scandal management over safeguarding forfeits his succession. This is not revolution, this is elementary Christianity.
All ecclesiastical offices, including the papacy, will have term limits. The words fell like thunder in that marble hall. Cardinal Rossi actually stood up, as if he could physically escape the implications. But why should the servants of the eternal be granted earthly eternities? Why should the followers of the itinerant become the entrenched? 10 years, enough time to serve, insufficient time to ossify. Long enough to implement vision, short enough to prevent its calcification. The apostles walked with Christ for 3 years and changed the world. What excuse do we have for requiring decades? I watched Archbishop de Santos clutch his pictorial cross as if it were a life preserver. These men who preach about the pilgrim church have forgotten they too are pilgrims, not permanent residents. They have confused temporary stewardship with eternal ownership. Within hours of my speech, the divisions crystallized with shocking speed. The Leonists, they call my supporters, as if reform required a personality cult rather than a conscience. The custodians of tradition, they style themselves, as if tradition were a museum piece rather than a living stream. From Manila, a bishop sent his word. Holy Father, you have given voice to our voiceless prayers. From Munich, Cardinal Weber demanded my pastoral correction for endangering unity. From Sao Paulo, young priests gathered in the cathedral to sing Te Deums. From Boston, wealthy donors threatened to close their checkbooks. But here is what moves me most. The letters from the forgotten ones, the divorced and remarried, who thought they were condemned to spiritual exile, the parents of gay children who feared loving meant betraying faith, the abuse survivors who had given up hope of justice. They write not with theological arguments, but with tears of recognition. They write not as critics, but as children finally hearing their father's voice.
The tremors spread faster than any apostolic letter. In Nigeria, thousands gathered in cathedral squares, not for mass, but for witness. Young Catholics in Lagos carried signs reading "Truth over comfort" and "Reform over riches." In the Philippines, seminary students organized study circles on prophetic leadership. In Poland, university students questioned their bishops publicly about financial transparency. But the resistance proved equally swift and fierce.
Conservative Catholics in America formed the Preservation Society within 48 hours. German traditionalists called for my canonical deposition before the sun set. Cardinal Martelli of Florence published a letter questioning my mental competence, as if sanity were measured by willingness to preserve insanity. The Anglican Archbishop of Canterbury called to express fraternal concern for our institutional stability. The Orthodox Patriarch of Moscow issued a statement about papal overreach. Even the president of the Lutheran World Federation suggested I was moving too fast for healthy change. Too fast? Christ cleansed the temple in one afternoon. The apostles abandoned their nets in an instant. Truth does not operate on our timelines. It operates on God's urgency.
The real resistance came not in public statements, but in private maneuvers. Cardinal Secretary of State Parolin requested an urgent audience at midnight, the first of many such audiences. He spoke carefully, diplomatically, about pastoral prudence and gradual implementation. What he meant was, take it back, slow it down, bury it in committee. By dawn, I learned of the secret meetings. 9 cardinals had gathered in Cardinal Martini's apartments. 17 bishops had signed a private letter questioning my canonical authority to impose such reforms. 3 Vatican department heads had submitted health-related resignation letters. Apparently, the stress of transparency was too much for their constitutions. But here is what they could not understand. I was not acting alone. For months I had consulted with canonists, with theologians, with the people of God. For months I had prayed not for courage to act, but for wisdom to act rightly. What they saw as rash impulse was actually the fruit of careful discernment. Discernment that included voices they had spent decades silencing. The leaked audio recording of this one cardinal calling me a populist in papal robes only confirmed what I already knew. They feared the people of God more than they feared God himself.
They began the whisper campaign on the 4th day. The Pope is isolated. The Pope has lost the confidence of the Curia. The Pope is mentally unstable. As if speaking truth were a form of madness. As if calling sin by its name were a sign of incompetence. Cardinal Mueller published an article in L'Osservatore Romano, our own newspaper, questioning whether radical reform was compatible with apostolic stability. Archbishop Vigano emerged from whatever rock he had been hiding under to declare my reforms Protestantization of the papacy. 3 African bishops issued a joint statement about preserving the sacred traditions of our fathers. But for every voice of resistance, 2 voices of support emerged. The Catholic Women's Council of Ireland endorsed every reform unanimously. The Association of Catholic Priests in Australia called it the Pentecost we have been awaiting. Young Catholic movements across Latin America organized prayer vigils for the Pope of Truth. Most powerfully, the survivors spoke. Maria Gonzalez, who had been abused by a priest in Texas 30 years ago, published a video message. For the first time, I believe the Church means what it says about protecting children. Her words carried more authority than all the cardinals' letters combined.
By the end of the first week, the word hung in the air like incense. Schism. Cardinal Martelli's threat to convene an imperfect council to correct papal errors. Bishop Weber's suggestion that German dioceses might need to suspend implementation pending theological review. The American cardinal call for the College of Cardinals to intervene pastorally in the papal exercise of authority. They spoke carefully, these men, who had learned the art of rebellion through obedience. They never said depose, but spoke of pastoral intervention. They never said refuse, but spoke of prudent delay. They never said schism, but spoke of legitimate concerns about unity. But I remember what Christ said. Do you think I came to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, but division. Not division for its own sake, but the division that separates truth from falsehood, justice from comfort, the gospel from its counterfeit. If unity requires silence about abuse, then let us be divided. If peace requires tolerance of corruption, then let us have holy war. If communion demands the sacrifice of conscience, then let us eat alone until conscience is welcome at the table. I will not lie to you. The path ahead is dark and difficult. Some dioceses will resist the reforms until compelled by canon law. Some bishops will transfer their allegiance to shadow authorities. Some wealthy donors will seek to starve reform into submission. Some media will amplify every division while ignoring every healing. But I have seen the church that will emerge from this crucifixion. I have seen it in the eyes of young seminarians who entered formation seeking to serve, not to be served. I have seen it in the courage of nuns who speak truth to power regardless of consequences. I have seen it in lay Catholics who refuse to be silent shareholders in institutional dysfunction. This church will be smaller, poorer, and less politically influential. It will also be holier, more honest, and more credible. It will speak with the authority of integrity rather than the authority of position. It will lead by example rather than by exemption.
The choice before us is not between reform and tradition, but between transformation and death. Not between unity and division, but between authentic community and comfortable conformity. Not between papal authority and conciliar governance, but between service and self-service. My children, I have spoken these words knowing they may be my last as your Pope. If the College of Cardinals determines that reform requires different leadership, I will accept their judgment with the same obedience I ask of others. If the people of God decide that truth-telling is not among the charisms they seek in Peter's successor, I will step aside without bitterness. But I will not take back what I have said, and I will not slow down what has begun. The Holy Spirit has been knocking on our door for decades. I have simply decided to answer. The church I love is indeed sick, but sickness is not death, and confession is the beginning of healing. We have work to do, wounds to bind, trust to rebuild. We have a gospel to preach that is more beautiful than our failures, more powerful than our resistance, more transformative than our fears. The day the church broke open was the day it began to breathe again. Let us breathe together, in truth and in hope, until the breath becomes song, and the song becomes prayer, and the prayer becomes life. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.